This video is sponsored by War Thunder. The world of Dark Souls has always stood out because it feels like more than just a game map. Dive into the collision data or even step out of bounds and it becomes clear just how lore conscious that world really is. Even the rough edges and odd overlaps feel strangely purposeful, as if the land itself was part of the storytelling. Of course, not every quirk is intentional, some are artifacts of development, but when you start connecting the pieces, a bigger picture emerges, one that doesn't just support the lore, but often expands on it in surprising ways. So let's look closer at Lordran's design once again, and uncover what it still has to show us. To begin, I want to follow up on the last map dive, and on some great points many of you raised in the comments. In that episode, we looked at how the arena of the First Flame rests on a wooden foundation, and I speculated on whether it once sat within a great tree. And it turns out that isn't the only hint of this connection. Take the prologue, for instance. Before the First Flame itself is shown, the camera dives into a dark passage where embers flicker out into the air. But if I slow down the footage, look more closely. It isn't stone we're moving through. The entrance is wooden. The walls too, when they're lit up. We're travelling down the roots of an Archtree, and only at the end do we emerge into a cave where the First Flame burns, presumably right beneath the tree. Dark Souls 3 makes the idea even clearer. This game's kiln of the First Flame is more obvious, but stepping back still helps a lot. It's unmistakable. We are looking at the broken stump of a colossal tree. Once again, the First Flame sits within what was once a giant trunk. Is this the same tree, somehow? Or does the First Flame always take root within or beneath an Archtree, each cycle? Similar imagery shows up elsewhere at the Dreg Heap, with its great tree towering above our entire journey. The Demon Prince's arena, where you find Firelink Shrine, is wrapped in roots. And even the mountain itself, if you turn back and look from the outside before the cutscene to enter the ringed city, has a strangely wooden texture. These aren't coincidences. Across the series, the imagery keeps repeating. Fire entwined with wood, the First Flame bound to trees. Which makes me wonder, if the Age of Fire's primary power began within an Archtree, and continues to rely on Archtrees through the ages, what does that say about the Age of Ancients? Returning to Lordran, let's trace where else this tree imagery emerges. Naturally, there's Ash Lake and the Great Hollow. Much of the central region is spanned by huge canopies or roots. And all the way at the bottom lies Izalith, whose bed of chaos embodies tree symbolism in a very literal form. So let's work down the map. But before that, here's a fun little detail. Do you remember finding a soul of a great hero? To me, they always felt rarer and more special even than a boss soul. And they are. There's only 2 in the entire game. And curiously, they're found at the absolute highest and almost the absolute lowest points in the world. One is all the way up here, in the top of the tower where you first encounter Seath when he's immortal. It's even up the stairs, so halfway up the room. Meanwhile, the other is all the way down here, within this building in Izalith, almost as deep as it could be in Lordran. I like to think it's an illustration of how dense Lordran is. To get far away from Firelink Shrine is what's really difficult, and that's why the greatest of heroes only fell at the land's very limits. And while we're here, let's look more closely at Seath's prison tower. We've speculated before that the broken cogs once powered a rotating staircase system, allowing access to the rooms and book stacks that are now inaccessible. And this idea is all the more likely after looking with some new angles. If you look closely, you can see that the entire circular staircase is built as a separate piece from the walls. as though designed in a way that would allow them to move up or down. That's why there are not just temporary wooden walkways, but also makeshift platforms made from prison bars, laid down to enter the rooms. Patchwork systems, especially when compared to the impressive design of the rest of the archives. Quick pause to mention today's sponsor, War Thunder, the most comprehensive vehicle combat game ever made. Command over 2,500 tanks, planes, helicopters and ships spanning more than a century of military development. Each vehicle is modelled down to its components, engines, weapons, crew, and the X-ray view even shows exactly what fails when one takes a hit. It also lets you choose how serious you want things to be. Fast-paced arcade matches, the more grounded, realistic mode, or full simulator battles if you want to really commit. However you play, the vehicles behave as you'd expect, and it makes every encounter feel surprisingly tactical. Join a community of over 95 million players on PC, consoles, or even the all-new mobile version that allows you to play wherever you are. For new players, or anyone returning after 6 months, signing up on PC or consoles through the links in the pinned comment or description gives you a bonus pack, multiple premium vehicles, 100,000 silver lions, 7 days of premium account, and the exclusive Eagle of Valor decorator. It's only available for a limited time, so make sure to claim it. Now, Ash Lake. One of the most striking areas in the game. Even out of bounds, it's still breathtaking. So I'll slow down here just to let the views speak for themselves. There's a common theory that each Archtree leads to a different world, a kind of metaphysical branching, a multiverse situation, each with its own flame perhaps. And honestly, I love that idea. It really captures the sense of mystery that everyone feels in Ash Lake. But the way Ash Lake is placed in the map tells a more grounded story. Because FromSoft didn't only show Ash Lake once. As you likely remember, they used it again in the Tomb of Giants. Now, maybe this was just a subtle hint at the best hidden area in the game, but I think it's more than that. At the nearby bonfire you can also see Izalith, and like much of Lordran, this isn't just an image, it's an actual 3D render. All of this in place, just for a quick view. While some tricks, like the bloodstain trick we looked at last episode, can be a bit unreliable, the view is actually very accurate. If we look at the collision data, you can see that this position in the Tomb of Giants does, in fact, look out towards Izalith, at the same angle as it is rendered in-game. Yet another example that shows just how carefully the devs thought about these sightlines and the lore of the world design. By moving inside the Vista and looking back, you can see the Tomb of Giants cave in turn. Sadly though, you can't actually see the cave when in Izalith proper. A real shame. Nonetheless, the team wouldn't have put all this thought into an Izalith Vista and been careless with a view into Ash Lake just round the corner. Once again, this Vista isn't just a backdrop. Lots here are fully modelled and rendered, and it goes way further back, and round, than you might expect. You might even notice how the trees seem to wrap around the view of Izalith, but we'll come back to that. Here are some views from between the trees, as well as a look back at the Tomb of Giants. These trees form a dense canopy overhead, and plunge deep down into, presumably, open water below, though it does look more like mist than water, which is also interesting. If Archtrees hold up separate worlds, it's odd that we can sit beneath the canopy when outside Ash Lake entirely. Also, you've probably noticed how there's no sandy beach below to walk on, just water, or mist, and a sand bed beneath. That's because this isn't the same part of Ash Lake you visit. It's a completely separate section. Here's the collision data. Ash Lake is over here, but the view you can see from the Tomb of Giants is all the way over here, and it looks out in the opposite direction. And yet, despite that, the team still chose to add this vista, and fully render it. I think they did this to show that Archtrees aren't simply symbolic. They're physical structures that play a physical role within this world. Perhaps they do hold up the world as a sort of bedrock, and that's why Firelink Shrine basks beneath a large tree's canopy. In fact, on moving right to the skybox in Ash Lake, the roof texture does look like earth and roots, the world's very ground. Or perhaps it's more fundamental than that, given what we've looked at with the first flame. But they don't seem to be supporting separate worlds, else we couldn't get caught between realms like we do in the Tomb of Giants. Some trees reach higher than others. Some are broken. Some, of course, are burnt. But all in this world. And even more interestingly, is that these trees and Ash Lake aren't actually the lowest point in Lordran. Instead, that record goes to the infamous Bed of Chaos. A hint at what's to come. Which brings us to the Demon Ruins and Izalith. There's a lot of interesting stuff here. First, the ceaseless discharge skip. I'm sure you're all familiar with this one, but here's a better view of what happens. Only if you take his sister's robes from the nearby altar will Ceaseless do it. If you make as if to leave, he risks everything and jumps after you, but he doesn't have any purchase for his feet and hangs above the chasm beneath. So when you hit him, well, you're basically Scar to his Mufasa, making him lose his grip and fall. Anyway, looking at the area more broadly, we all know of course that this part of Dark Souls had rushed development, and it's always been a real shame, because the lore of demons is already so fascinating. It makes me wonder just how much more could have been explored with enough time. Especially because even if enemies and level design is sorely lacking compared to the rest of the game, in terms of scale and unique level assets, it's actually got a lot going for it. Take for example the first vista of the ruins. Off to the left is an absolutely enormous, metallic looking dome. It's emblazoned with the flower symbols we've previously linked to the gods. The scale, the detailing, it's clearly incredibly important. We also saw the full dome earlier when clipping out of bounds in the Tomb of Giants, to help illustrate its size. For those that don't know, this dome actually encloses Izalith itself within. But we'll get to that shortly. And then, look at all the cliffside structures. There's loads all over the place, way up above Quelaag's domain. Like the dome, they're easy to miss in a usual playthrough. I mean, did you know that they're fully modelled assets? There are stairs, corridors, and even a number of rooms. There's a couple different variants of these building assets. If we clip into the wall and look back, you can see just how much there is here. Totally out of reach for the player. And like much of Izalith, these too have flowers everywhere. But look, there are two types of rooms. One small. These are more common. And then another, of the exact same style, but much bigger, both in space inside and the doorway to enter. Almost as if there's the small size for humans and human-sized creatures, and then another for much larger beings. In our demons video, we deep dived into the history of demonkind, how they were wrongly viewed, and even how the emergence of demons wasn't actually an accident, but a deliberate step taken consciously by individuals. At least, for a time. That's why Quelaag acts warmly to her spider lower half. So, here again is evidence that humans and demons might have once lived together in ordered harmony, with rooms built for both. A period of time where it all worked, before the witch lost control and chaos took over. Also, have you noticed all the wood everywhere as you travel further down into the region? Isn't it strange, in an area whose theme is lava, fire and more lava, that so much wood was integrated into the level design? I'm sure it's nothing. One mystery I've always wondered about with Izalith is what it looks like before chaos took over. For example, Izalith has clear paths, roads, and doors whose purpose is now completely lost. This gate in the Centipede Demon Arena sadly has nothing rendered behind it. It also doesn't point towards, well, anything in Lordran. So I wonder if this was simply an alternate path to Izalith. Perhaps the broken bridge with the bonfire beneath once continued further out, and would have eventually joined with this lost path. Speaking of roads, this bridge with the Titanite demon is a great example of the infrastructure Izalith once had. They had a number of these mighty roads, which presumably therefore joined places of importance together. In a playthrough, they're often blocked by routes, but where might they have once led? Away from the Centipede Demon Arena entrance is unfortunately another dead end. It doesn't point anywhere in particular. It does lie below the catacombs, however, so maybe there was some way to travel between those regions in the past. The magic of Izalith did make for some stylish lifts after all. The road above, however, is really interesting, because it's rendered decently far in game, and would travel just under this ledge with the Chaos Ember at the end. Again, there is nothing of note clipping through the map, but the direction is interesting, pointing just to the side of Ash Lake, the only other area at a similar altitude. But very interestingly, if we enable the New Londo collision map, the road seems to lead directly into the abyss of the Four Kings. Now, of course we can't draw too much from this. After all, as we've looked at before, the entrance to the abyss is one of the few examples in Lordran where the map doesn't quite line up correctly, and slightly overlaps with the Tomb of Giants. However, I can't help but wonder. The Izalith Catalyst speaks about how the witch used sorcery long before pyromancy. And then, in Dark Souls 3, the Izalith staff description says, "With the birth of the Chaos Flame, the Flame Witches were at once both sorcerers and shamans. Faith adjusts the power of sorceries cast using this catalyst, and the staff also seems to boost the power of dark sorceries." So, there is a connection between Izalith and the Dark. But that's a whole other topic, something we'll have to look at in the New Londo series, so stay tuned. Moving further down, just in case you didn't know, you can see the Centipede Demon long before the boss fight. They're just camouflaged on the wall side here. Sadly, you can't damage them though. And in case you ever thought this was an illusory wall by the sunlight maggots, it was meant to be at some point. Here's the little tunnel behind that's not used. Also, notice how there isn't actually a normal path down to the Centipede Demon fight or Izalith. Instead, routes form the path down now. So perhaps there was some level of separation between the two areas. After all, just above is a lift directly into Quelaag's domain, a princess. Or perhaps a completely different route was once taken to reach the city. Then further along, the wooden tendrils continue to form a path, but this time they allow you to cross the lava lake. Isn't that strange? Using wood to avoid burning. Anyway, that brings us back to the giant dome. The only reason we can enter the lake at all is because the dome was shattered, again by roots. Clip out of bounds, and you can see it more clearly. enclosing the city in full. I also want to take a moment to properly illustrate the scale we're looking at here. The walls of the Kiln of the First Flame are bigger, but this isn't a wall. It's a fully enclosed structure. Or at least it was, once, before it was broken open. Looking at the collision data, or by clipping through the map, it's possible to see the dome in its entirety, unbroken. Why would they have built it on this scale? To contain the Chaos Flame? Maybe, but its beauty suggests it wasn't just a reaction. It feels planned, deliberate, a symbol of pride. Indeed, once you enter Izalith proper and look back, you can see that the dome has been broken open not just where you enter, but most of the top of the dome is completely gone. However, if the dome was still intact, you can see here that the very top of the city of Izalith would have actually clipped through the ceiling. Though speculative, that would suggest that Izalith, or at least the main central tower, was built at a later time than the dome, once it had already been broken open. Another fascinating detail I noticed adds to this. The flower symbol is throughout the demon ruins, the giant dome, even on the ramparts of the city itself. But, even though many other shared patterns are still there, the flowers are not anywhere to be found on the towers throughout the city. These smaller ones, and notably the large central tower that would have broken through the dome roof. So it's possible that the main city walls, lower district, dome and demon ruins date back further in history, to when Izalith had positive relations with the gods. And then the towers came later, after the dome was broken, and the gods were no longer the allies they once were. As a quick aside, I want to return to Izalith's sheer scale, and how it was potentially built for creatures both large and small. During your playthrough, you'll of course have fought tons of these enemies, demonic statues. They're pretty simple, and a similar size to the chosen undead. But have you ever looked up when you're in the city? Can you see? There are two statues way up on the main tower. From this distance, you might not have thought anything of it, but they're absolutely massive. This is how big they are relative to the player character. Isn't that just insane? It really makes my mind go wild with the lost potential of Izalith, and their monumental civilization. Finally, there's the Bed of Chaos. Hated as a boss, but still, interesting as a piece of design. This is what's become of the Witch of Izalith. The wooden body actually sits upon a giant throne. Yet another sign of the stability Izalith once had, even after huge demonic statues came about. And in case you're curious, here's the animation that only plays once when you first enter. The Bed of Chaos is basically an animated tree, so at first, you'd think all the wooden growths in the region are just extensions of the boss. Born of the flame of chaos, it would make sense that the wood was resistant to fire. But look closely. Up above the ruins, they hang down like roots. All the way down to Izalith itself, the wooden tendrils reach downwards. Roots, not branches. But within Izalith, they stretch outwards, like branches. Outside the dome are roots, inside the city are branches. And they actually meet in the lava lake, where you can clearly see the difference, and both directions collide. Furthermore, the roots are generally far bigger than the branches, seemingly responsible for the dome's crack we enter through, and the ceiling's collapse. In fact, if we return to the Bed of Chaos and look up, you can see the arena is built around an opening at the top, where roots come down, and are what forms around the boss itself. So clearly, the Bed of Chaos is not innately tree-like, but parasitic, as the bug's appearance might suggest, feeding off of something far larger. A theme we've looked at previously in our demons video. From Quelaag and her sister, to the Egg Bearers, many demons have a parasitic, or maybe even symbiotic nature. So, if the branches stem from the bed of chaos, and the roots are something else, what is the Witch of Izalith drawing her tree-like qualities from? Let's follow the roots. Up and out. Initially, it seems like nothing's there, right? But keep looking. It sits right behind the city of Izalith. It's just hard to make out in the shadow. But there's what looks like an Archtree. By moving closer, you can see it better lit up. The enormity of it is really hard to illustrate, but I'll do my best. This is a view from further up the trunk. And yeah, that's the entirety of Izalith down there. To put that into perspective, this is the Great Hollow in the collision data. If we compare that to Izalith, you can see that its diameter would comfortably fit within the city's perimeter. So, compare that, the Great Hollow, which is already massive, to this Izalith tree. It's multiple times wider than the entire city, perhaps even wider than the dome, and so many times taller than the Great Hollow. It's kind of game-breaking. I mean, when looking at the collision data, it feels like it might even be able to reach the Duke's archives. This must be an Archtree, but it is strange, since all the trees in Ash Lake, or from the view in the Tomb of Giants, are pretty uniform in scale. Some are bigger than others, but never by that much. So my mind returns to the question for demons. Are they parasitic or symbiotic? What if the Witch of Izalith took on these tree-like qualities of an Archtree, and in turn, the Archtree became something more demonic, growing to an unnatural scale? If we return to the Ash Lake scene from the Tomb of Giants, you can see here how Izalith is actually surrounded by Ash Lake, chaos nestled within the boundless peace. So returning to how the Bed of Chaos is the lowest point in Lordran, you might initially think that's only a coincidence, since lore-wise that can't make sense. Ash Lake forms the bedrock of the world, after all. But looking at it with this view, and after learning about the city's own Archtree, I think it was a conscious decision to make the Bed of Chaos lower than Ash Lake. Because the Bed of Chaos isn't just combined with an Archtree, it's entangled within the roots, beneath it. That's to say, roots that are inherently lower than Ash Lake. Once, perhaps Izalith was part of Ash Lake, its tree just one of many, until the witch delved deeper. On another note, if we look at the collision map, you'll notice that the tree in Izalith also sits not that far from the kiln of the first flame. With the lean, it's unlikely, but does make me wonder about what tree was burned by Gwyn, whose wooden base we saw before. Given everything we've learned about how the first flame fundamentally relates to Archtrees, the Witch of Izalith combining with an Archtree herself makes much more sense. Her soul tells us she sought to recreate the first flame from her own power, and if the first flame itself is rooted in an Archtree, of course she would try to bind her fire to one as well. But what she made was no true first flame. The kiln shows us that the first flame has the power to consume Archtrees completely. That's likely how Ash Lake was carved out, how the Age of Fire renews itself, and why the final area lies buried in endless ash. Izalith, though, tells the opposite story. No matter the witch's strength, her pyromancy, or the endless lava of her city, her flame could not burn through the Archtree she used. It was no first flame. And the tree's roots endured, breaking through the dome, twisting through the ruins, and even carrying us across lava where stone could not. And that contrast raises the deeper question. Are Archtrees bound to the first flame itself, linked each time it's kindled? Fire's growth is always tied to something alive, something that must be consumed, after all. If so, then Izalith's tragedy isn't just about chaos or demons, it's about what the first flame costs, every time it's lit. Thanks again to War Thunder for sponsoring the video. Play it for free using the links in the pinned comment or description, and new or returning players on PC and consoles can pick up a bonus pack with premium vehicles, silver lions, and the Eagle of Valor decorator, available for a limited time. Thank you for watching. Like and subscribe so I know to make more, and let me know what else you'd like me to cover.